Well, most kings and nobility who are interested in keeping a stable government stick with tradition. It's the way things have been set up for over 1,000 years. It's the way that they know, and they stick with that tradition. Merchants who benefit from church businesses also stay Catholic. You might not think of this. This might sound silly, but one of the groups who stay Catholic are fishmongers, people who sell fish, because the Catholic tradition is no fish on Friday, or no meat on Fridays. Therefore, the fishmongers sell a huge amount of fish to people who follow that tradition. So, of course, they're going to stay Catholic because that tradition is something that helps them out. Intellectuals who have studied, who follow the ideas of humanism, people like Erasmus who believe in reforming the church from the inside out, are going to stay Catholic and try to reform the church instead of going off in a brand new direction. They're going to stick with the traditional ways of doing things. Kings and nobilities who are interested in keeping money at home and promoting the glory of their country are going to go Protestant. Remember, if you stay Catholic, you owe a tax to the Pope, and it's also an international thing because the Pope, a dude in Italy, has final say-so over your country. A lot of rulers are really not okay with that. They want to keep the power and authority in their country. They don't want to give the power and authority to a dude in Italy. They're not okay with the international thing, so they keep things at home. Merchants and guilds who are interested in not having to get the permission of the church for everything, they're going to go Protestant because there's much more of a sense of independence, personal freedom, self-fashioning, making choices of who you're going to be in the Protestant tradition. And also, a lot of those people who were paying for preachers in their churches, the educated people who are interested in getting more books, more education for themselves, having copies of the Bible to read at home, making decisions for themselves and their family, they're going to go Protestant. Each one of these choices, going Catholic or going Protestant, has different advantages, and people are very sensitive to those advantages. Catholicism offers stability and internationalism, something that's been in place for many years. It also gives an assurance of God's blessing in physical terms. You know that you're doing good deeds because the church is blessing you. You know that your confession is working because you receive penance. Someone tells you what you have to do to make up what you've done wrong. It relies on the familiar feudal power structure, the chain of being, that tells you where you fall, where do you stand, how do you do things with this familiar authority. Protestantism plays into nationalism, the glory of your country, not sending things out of your country, not relying on Rome. There's also a personal aspect in Protestantism that we haven't seen since Roman mystery religions. There's a sense of the individual relating to God, a sense that God cares about you, and you don't have to go to someone else to get God's forgiveness. You can directly ask God for forgiveness. You don't have to go to someone else to have the Bible explained to you. You can read the Bible for yourself. And there's a strong sense that God doesn't just talk to kings and popes. God talks to normal, ordinary people, which is a major selling point because people crave that personal attention. What does Luther introduce that so changes everything? Luther introduces the idea of salvation through faith only. You don't have to do good works for salvation. Instead, Luther says that you do good works because you are grateful that you're going to the afterlife. Luther says that you don't do good works to get to the afterlife. You do good works because you're going to the afterlife. Luther questions the sacraments. In fact, he actually only accepts 2 of the 7 sacraments of the church because he says he can only find those 2 sacraments in the Bible. The other sacraments, the other rituals, Luther says that they are not in the Bible, so he will not accept them. Luther also doesn't accept the idea of purgatory, which kills a lot of the fees that the church is paying and totally kills the idea of getting an indulgence to help someone out of purgatory. For Luther, salvation is between man and God. You don't get saved by going to church. The church is supposed to teach and spread the word, not provide forgiveness. Luther believes that God provides forgiveness. The church simply provides guidance. He also rejects any authority other than the Bible, sola scriptura. He believes that people should be able to read the Bible for themselves, which, as I mentioned before, causes a huge controversy because that causes problems with questioning the authority of the king, which is also a major issue. Luther does not believe in simply having the Bible in Latin translation. Luther wants to go back to the Greek New Testament and translate that into German, into English, and so on, so people can read the Bible for themselves. He also has a terrible time because there are individual readings of the Bible. Not everyone agrees with them, and he thinks they're idiots because they don't agree with his version. Luther feels the Bible is very clear, and he doesn't understand how people interpret it differently, but they do. Luther has fits because there are other people who read the passage of the Last Supper, and they do not see that the body and blood are literally turned into the body and blood of Jesus. They don't believe in transubstantiation. Luther feels that's totally wrong, and he thinks they're idiots. They think Luther's an idiot. What's the authority? Well, the Bible. Well, who says which interpretation is right? Nobody does, because they've rejected the power of the Pope. Luther hates other interpretations. He feels they're wrong. In fact, one of my favorite Luther stories, there's actually a story of a guy who really idolizes Luther. He thinks Luther's a great teacher, and he writes to Luther asking him to debate this whole idea of communion. Luther writes back to him a 5-word answer, rejecting the request for a debate. His answer is, "I do not debate with monkeys." That's it. He's done. Luther is not happy with the outcome of his reform, actually, but it's too late. Luther's documents, his printing, his writing, has broken down the sense of church authority. It's moved power into the hands of kings and princes, into the secular authority, away from the religious authority. And it has changed the landscape of the world by changing the landscape of religion. In Catholic tradition, the Bible and tradition are given equal authority. People have to go to church to earn good deeds and go through the rituals that will put them on the path to salvation. Catholicism provides stability and an international agreement, honoring other countries. Protestants only respect the Bible. They focus on individual relationships with God, and they focus on nationalism and the glory of individual countries. Now, that's going to have a major impact on politics, but not only is it going to impact politics, it's going to impact art and culture. Remember, people make stuff that reflects their beliefs and the way they see the world. We talked about how the influence of humanism totally and completely changed the way artists worked. How much freedom Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo had because they were able to choose who they were going to be and showcase their talents. Well, a shift away from the church as the showcase for art. The church no longer at the center of the world. The idea that kings, princes, merchants have a right to art and beauty in their homes instead of paying for everything to go into the church is going to completely change the artwork we have. Now, let's take a look at the artwork that's created during the Reformation, and you're going to see how different that artwork is going to become. And we're going to take a major step toward much more modern artwork, toward artwork that looks nothing like what you saw in the Renaissance. We're going to take a little step in artwork toward the modern world.